back, everybody. We're back online again, and I think could we perhaps bring up that motion from Councillor Williams, please? Could we put that on the screen? Councillor Williams, can you hear me okay? Did you unmute Councillor Williams?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, we've got the right one?
We do.
Okay. So I'll assume that we're just looking through this now. We didn't get a chance to look through it in the break. So if I could ask each of the councillors just to read through it by themselves and familiarise themselves with those 7 points. Thank you. Considering that the other councillors have only just seen it, I might just ask the other councillors if there are any clarifications required. Could you bring up the councillors on the screen again, just very briefly? Councillor, any clarifications required of the motion that's on the table? Councillor Williams, do you need to speak to that further?
No, Mr. Mayor, I've had my opportunity to speak.
Anybody wishing to speak against it? Anybody wishing to speak for it? Councillor Miles.
Happy to speak for it, Mr. Mayor. I guess a bit of the issue I have with the report as it's been tabled is that it doesn't really differ substantially from the first draft that was presented to us some months ago. It seems to have overridden a lot of the feedback, and I note that there was obviously those public meetings and responses were received, but the feedback strongly indicates to me that those affected properties, particularly on the overland flow, the 183 odd properties that are going to have a potential notation on their 10.7 certificates based on this overland flow, is a little bit overzealous. As Councillor Williams said, a cookie cutter approach to this issue when you're comparing it to municipalities like the Hawkesbury, Penrith, even Parramatta, which have widespread and substantial flooding issues, you're not comparing apples with apples. I've got folks that live in Windsor who, in that same flood event that we saw the graph of earlier in the debate of this motion, had torrents of water pouring through their property. And of course, that is seriously flood-prone land. I wouldn't consider Rocher Avenue to be flood-prone land. I also wouldn't consider the possibility of 10% of your property having 15 centimetres of water running across it once in 100 years have those notations put on their title, and really that pertains more to the mainstream flooding properties that essentially where we are putting a blanket overland flow notation on 10.7 certificates for a lot of people that will not be substantially affected by flooding, haven't been substantially affected by flooding, and not only is that going to lower their house prices and up their insurance premiums, what it's going to do is subject them potentially to flood-related development controls in the future. And they're not going to take any solace in the fact that, you know, that is being done to them as a result of the potential for 10% of their property to be flooded once in 100 years. Now, out of that, there will be genuine overland flow issues, and I think that there will be some residents that want to take advantage of the funding that may come with their properties being registered as flood prone. But for the vast majority, and the feedback that I've had from residents and the feedback that I think we can get out of the community consultation is the majority don't feel that their properties are going to be affected in the way that the report has indicated. And I don't think that cookie cutter approach is going to serve as well in Hunters Hill as it does in those areas like Parramatta and Hawkesbury and Penrith, which have, you know, widespread problems with greenfield sites, for example, exporting and importing fill. So I think we need to step back and look at what flood mitigation we can do in the next stages of this process, but also how serious we want to be about putting notifications on people's 10.7 certificates in the knowledge that it really does affect the prices of their property, and it really will affect not only their capacity to improve their properties, but also their insurance premiums. And I don't think slapping it on 183 odd titles for overland flow is going to be something welcomed in the community. So I can only recommend that this motion be brought forward, and particularly given that it's asking in point 7 to seek relevant advice from the state government agency as to whether or not we can have a broad compliance approach to the flood study. And I think that other local government areas have had an approach that is unique to their topography and their local government area. And I think that's something that we need to explore here, because blanketing 180 odd homes with this notation on their certificate, their 10.7 certificates, is not going to be something that's welcomed, particularly for residents that are not going to be substantially affected by flooding, and people that some of which who have lived in the area for a very long time and have observed that there is no real flood affected nature to their properties. So I think that this is a sensible way to have a merit-based flood study as we progress into progress out of the study stages and into the implementation stages of our flood planning. But I think
Councillor,
we can't just...
Councillor, sorry to interrupt you. Your 5 minutes is up. Are you almost finished? Almost finished?
What needs to be said.
All right, thank you, Councillor. Anybody wishing to speak against? Right reply, Councillor Williams, if you would like it. Hold on, Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Sanderson, you're going to have to be a bit quicker in the future. Could we have Councillor Sanderson's mic, please? Are you speaking against?
No, I'm speaking for.
For. Please go ahead.
Look, unfortunately, I didn't see Councillor Williams' motion until it was just sent to us, and I've only had a brief chance to look at it. But I'll certainly respect Councillor Williams' expertise and his all that he must have learned in the process of chairing the relevant committee. There is, and I mean, I also share Councillor Miles' deep concern that there are a lot of perceptions about the report that we have before us that we have been asked to endorse tonight. I know that Councillor Williams' motion doesn't endorse that. At the end of the day, I suppose we have to, and we've got to consider what form we endorse it in. I certainly wouldn't be happy to endorse it in the form it's in at the present time. It does have a number of mistakes, that some of which have been noted in by the submissions tonight. In particular, I had the experience of visiting Mr. Holswitch's property at his invitation witness the 24-inch drain that was apparently installed there in the late 1950s. And that drain certainly is there. I asked a question at the briefing last week about that. They say that it was been included in the model. If you look in the appendices in the report, it doesn't show up. So the report isn't consistent with with the current state, and I think that's something that needs to be rectified. I also, without knowledge of Councillor Williams' motion, I also circulated an alternate motion at 5 o'clock tonight. It went to all meetings, or to all councillors, and it also dealt with the whether or not we endorse the report. What I suggested in that motion is that we, my second point was the council defer endorsement of the Huntersville Local Government Area Flood Study, attached one, until the study is updated to A, address pertinent points made by the public exhibition submissions, B, include relevant omissions from the modelling, such as the large diameter stormwater drain from
Councillor, could I just ask you to stop just for a moment? Are you foreshadowing an alternate motion?
Well, my first question would be, because the Councillor Williams' motion hasn't dealt with whether or not we endorse the study, is whether he would contemplate what I'm reading out at the moment, right, as a 7th point in his motion.
I wonder if we might bring that up on the screen so that it's a bit clearer to all of us.
Yeah, that should be available.
Just one moment. Okay, so that's it there. Is that the correct one?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I only sent through one, so there shouldn't be any mistake with that tonight.
Okay.
So what
are you asking Councillor Williams to consider?
I'd ask Councillor Williams and Councillor Miles whether they would consider adding my point 2 to the end of their motion, because it sets in place something to rectify the report that we have at hand, so that we are in a position at some stage to be able to endorse it and get the funding for it.
Okay, Councillor Williams.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Sanderson. Yeah, well, I've got no problems. My motion clearly does not endorse the outcome, and it is designed to get into a further process of dialogue and sorting out issues without resorting to undue stress on our residents. So if that wants to be added as a further addition to the motion, I've got no objection to that, but I think most of it is covered, if not all of it is covered, in the motion we currently have before us.
Okay, well, if the amendments been accepted, where do we stand, Mr. Mayor?
Okay, so let's can we take the suggestion from Councillor Sanderson, add it to Councillor Williams' motion, and then I'll come back to you, Councillor Williams, and check that it's. Councillor Sanderson, could you direct us here?
Oh, okay, that's fine, unless we put any other points in. That final end is redundant, and the semicolon should be replaced with a full stop. But apart from that, provided that's a cut and a copy and paste, that's all good.
Councillor Williams.
D is a repetition of 6, but that's fine. I can see what is intended there, so it's consistent with what I'm trying to achieve.
Councillor Miles, are you okay with that?
Yes, I am, Mr. Mayor.
All right, so Councillor Williams, right a reply. I think that's where we're up to. Go, hold on a moment. Councillor McLaughlin, you were really quick too. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I won't speak any more in support of the motion, but I do support the motion that's on the table at the moment. One point I just did want to raise was just going back to the minutes of the floodplain risk management committee. I noted in the minutes that at the second last point in those minutes, it talks about council meet with residents who made submissions to explain the response to the concerns raised. That committee meeting was on the 17th of February. So I'm wondering, was that actioned? And that was that took up quite a lot of the submissions. They talked about not being contacted prior or after they had made their submissions. And I'm just wondering if that actually occurred. I'm not sure who it's directed to, whether it's through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager, or whether it's through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Chair of the committee.
General Manager, I think.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask the Director to provide an update on that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So the time frame was after this meeting, the 17th of February meeting, we were to table a consultants briefing to the councillors in early March, which we were unable to do due to the onset of COVID-19 and an illness at the time. And subsequently, the matter was deferred up until the councillor briefing of a week ago.
Right. So just to clarify, there was no further consultation with residents after the 17th of February.
That's correct.
Right.
Councillors, any further questions? If not, I'll pass it back to Councillor Williams for right of reply. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just briefly, what council is proposing here does, I believe, head us down the path of meeting our requirements under the process of flood management. It is something that I think we owe our residents to make sure that they're included in this process and that we get realistic and agreed outcomes for how these properties are tagged. And I do stress the point, and I think from reading the guidelines and listening to the legal advice that we've got, the whole process is not about putting unreasonable controls on property. It's not about putting undue stress on residents or property owners. And it's a merit-based process. And we need to make sure that in this process that we do reflect what is not unique, but not the norm that you would find in a lot of council areas. And I guess that's probably why Hunters Hill and the other council, which I think might be Lane Cove or Mossman or somewhere with similar sort of topography, haven't seen it as being an imperative to complete the task as a matter of due course. So I think it's important that we do take the time now to just tidy up the study, to talk to our residents about the specific impact of this threshold as proposed in the study is going to have on their properties. And as I understand it, council can make decisions in relation to the reasonableness and the fairness of imposing a tagging based on the individual circumstances. So I think we've got a bit of process to go. I don't think it's impossible to achieve before a funding deadline, which is really just a deadline about the study. The study's been done. It's now how we interpret and communicate it and make sure that it's fair and reasonable with residents. So I think we're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. I'm sure our experts would have some comments if it were appropriate for them to have comments at this stage, but we look forward to Mr. Schmidt-Lehmann and Mr. Steve Gray. We look forward to hearing your comments post this meeting on some of the issues that have been raised. So I'll put the motion. Those in favour, against, That's carried. That's unanimous. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your assistance tonight. We move on to item 4.3, development applications determined under delegated authority in May 2020. The recommendations there on page 135. Moved, Councillor Williams, seconded, Councillor Crassoy. Councillor Williams? Could we open?
Yeah, I've got it. Yep. Just one minor question on page 144. At the top of the page, we talk about a replacement planting, but we don't specify the species, and all other we do. I was just wondering what the reason might be there that we're not prepared to specify what species it is.
To the General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director.
Could we?
Thank you, Mayor. What page number was it again?
I'm quite happy to take it on notice. It's 144, I think. Yeah, 144 at the top of the page. It's probably more a question that you can just send me a note about, because it doesn't basically affect the outcome.
Good suggestion. Let's do that. Any further queries? Okay. So I'll put the recommendation. Those in favour, Councillor Crassoy. Sorry, looking down, not looking up. Councillor Crassoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a question, which I'm also happy to take on, pass on notice, is on page 142, there's a refusal of some shade cloths at the daycare centre in Joubert Street. My question is, what I'm assuming, and I guess that's why it's a question, I'm assuming it was possibly a complying development that council didn't approve, wasn't approved by council. But either way, we've got a daycare centre that needs shade for children who are currently, when they play outside in the sun, I imagine. And I'm just reading through all the reasons for the refusal, and a lot of them are, well, anyway, so my question is, how can we support this daycare to just get their shade cloths up for the kids without it being onerous or any more costly for them? Because some of the points in there are, yeah, exhausting, really. So I'm happy to take it on notice, but I just think it would be nice for us to try and support the daycare to do the right thing by the kids.
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, will provide an update. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further queries, councillors? Recommendations there on 4.3. Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you. Item 4.4, which is development applications determined by the Development Control Unit in May 2020. Recommendations there on 152. Moved Councillor Crassoy, seconded Councillor Sanderson. Councillor Crassoy.
Nothing to add, Mr. Mayor.
Any further discussion required, councillors? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you. I'll move on to 4.5, report on outstanding matters. Councillors moved, Councillor Collins, seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor Collins? No comment. Councillors, any further discussion? I'm sorry.
Yes, sorry.
Got your mic running. Sorry, thank you. Go ahead.
Just some questions, if I may.
Please.
On page 172, and I think it's also repeated, this is about the Mary Street crossing. It's still here as being completed around the end of term 2. Is that still on track? Because I think we're getting pretty close to, are we?
General Manager.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll ask the Director to provide an update.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So we've just received Ausgrid approval. So we are going out to quotes, and quotes should be closing this week for a civil contractor to work with the electrical contractor. So we'll be able to update on a timeline as soon as we've engaged that contractor and sourced all the approvals and materials we need. So I can provide an update through a bulletin.
Yeah, okay. Well, we'd have something by the next meeting anyway, a couple of weeks to know a timetable. Would that be right? Yeah, okay, cool. And I imagine that we'd find out very soon whether or not the grant was successful, but I suppose we can just push on anyway, and if the money comes, it will probably come about the right time. Okay.
Through Mr. Mayor, we understand the grant outcomes will be announced the end of June, around the 28th.
All right. There's no mention here of the school safety committee. That's probably just an oversight, but that was I don't think, I didn't see it. Is it in here?
General Manager?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I don't believe so. As councillors will be aware, at the last meeting, the question was asked about the outstanding matters report, and we flagged that we were looking at a new format and pulling that from our system. We're still refining that. So one of the points that, thank you for picking that up, Councillor Collins. Councillor Sanderson also gave me some feedback earlier today where we included a motion that shouldn't have been included. It seems we scooped up the recommendation but not the resolution of council, and that was in relation to businesses on the electoral roll.
Oh yeah, okay.
We should have taken that one off. So apologies for that, councillors.
Well,
Any further queries?
Yeah, sorry. So can I get an update on that anyway? Even though, well, we're working on charter. So
General Manager,
sorry,
go ahead.
through you, Mr. Mayor, if I could come back to you, Councillor Collins.
Yeah. Okay. I think I've got. No, look, I think that's it. Yeah.
Any further discussion required?
One more question.
Councillor Collins.
Actually, don't worry about it. It's okay.
Councillor Sanderson. Go ahead.
Sorry, I thought Councillor Cresswell got in before me, but there were a few that I've noted. The report on precinct meetings. We've got a resolution of council. I hope at some stage we will go back to that when we get over COVID-19, although we're talking about other things that were discussed outside of council. I found the precinct meetings were useful, and I hope one of these days we'll get back to them. The next ones I noticed were two that are referred to the General Manager this morning. One was the resolution regarding the retain a role of business voters. The motion was lost at that meeting, so I presume that won't progress any further. Then the other one I pointed out, which I did point out to the General Manager just so that people are aware of it, we've got a motion about the audit of the treetop canopy. As I recall, that was a meeting I chaired in February, and at that motion, I believe Councillor Crassoy suggested that be merged with another motion. What we have here is just the part of the motion dealing with the treetops, whereas in fact there were other elements that Councillor Crassoy brought in, I think relating to the collection of organic waste to save it going into the MWU. There may have been one other. Sorry, I've got 2 pages stuck together here. Yeah, one other thing I was a little concerned about, a motion, this is the last item on page 174, a resolution apparently 085 or 08520 relating to tow trailer policies, that's got to come back to a report in June. The other thing was that there was a motion that I believe Councillor Collins moved and I seconded back in the meeting of October 2018, keeps on falling off the agenda, and that involved discussion with Woolwich residents about parking down there, and also other measures we can take, like extending time parking into further areas there, deal with the issues around the marina. It also dealt with whether the marina was complying with its obligations under the development consent regarding parking on site. And yes, there was one other item. That's to do with resolution 0720, which was partly to do with the Huntersville Public School drop-off zones. I think in a recent councillor bulletin, we said we'd get a report on that in a couple of weeks, and it's now saying it'll be back in the next few months. There is one item in there that I'd be particularly interested to see, and that would be the viability of the either no stopping or keep clear signs at the Harry Shelley Memorial Park intersection. So is there any, can we get further refinement on when that report will be due? Because I think that's something we need to act on fairly soon.
Yeah,
General Manager.
Sorry. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to the Director, Service Delivery.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, we have engaged a consultant who's looking at both of those issues outside the public and at the intersection of Mount Street and Alexandra, and he's currently also consulting with the RMS as to what potential solutions are available to us. So as soon as we've got a defined time frame, I'll bring that back through the bulletin as an update.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, any further discussion required? Councillor Crassoy. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, thank you, General Manager and the team for pulling this report back together for us. Can I ask a question? Will this now be provided quarterly going forward, or is that a thing through you, Mr. Mayor, to the General Manager?
General Manager.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, we'll do quarterly, and next financial year will also be reporting quarterly on the operational plan as well.
Thank you, that's good to hear. So thank you for that. I just wanted to ask a couple of questions. I'm happy for most of them to be on notice. On page 165, on the 11th of the 3rd, item 33/19, or resolution 33/19, it says the expected completion date was October 2019 and that a briefing for the matter was provided on the 27th of May. I don't think I've missed any briefings, but I don't recall getting an update on Gladesville Reserve and the funding and where all of that is at.
Do we take them on notice, or do you want them answered now?
Sorry,
if you have the answer now, great, but otherwise I'm happy to take it on notice.
Sorry, Councillor, could you just, if you don't mind, tell me what page it was again?
165, and it's item 3319.
Yeah.
I'm on paperless this meeting, so I'm doing it off a tablet.
Well done. And it's the item about the upgrade of Gladesville Reserve. There was a notice of motion, and coincidentally, not long after that, there was some funding allocated to council. So I was just curious where that's at, as it was in March 2019. I'm guessing it's to do with the plan of management, but it says in here that we had a briefing on the 27th of May, and I just don't recall that. So
no, I'll take that one on notice.
Sure.
Councillor Crassoy.
Thank you.
Next.
Then, thank you. On page 166. Item 116/19, about the transport option advocacy between Valencia Street and Northwest Metro at North Ryde, which was made in June last year. it says a letter was sent to the department. It doesn't say when. And it just says under further investigation with STA on possible options. I'm just curious when the letter was sent and...
Yep, through you, Mr. Mayor, I'll need to give you that date.
That's fine. Thank you. And then on page 167, item 239/19, the minutes of the Hunters Hill Main Street Committee, it says that council officers liaise with the committee on the scope of the proposed signage for the public car park for Hunters Hill Village, etc. I think this was just like, they just wanted like a little, you know, parking that way sign. I didn't think it was something that needed massive scoping and budgeting or anything like that. In the meantime, the Hunters Hill Hotel did pay for signage themselves to direct residents towards free 3-hour parking under the pub, which I think they've now, due to financial reasons, had to remove. But I'm just not sure that that item needs to really be there as something that council staff are still having to put a lot of time into, because I don't think the public parking signage is so much a thing anymore. But anyway, that was just an observation. And then lastly, on page 170, the motion about the audit to the tree canopies, I just wanted to make note that Blue Mountains City Council in 2011 developed a street tree master plan. And so while this is about the audit, I just thought I'd mention that that's just a pretty wonderful thing going forward, to be aware of what some other councils are doing, to have a master plan for our street trees and avenues, memorials, etc., to continue to capitalise on opportunities to have tree canopies, I think is pretty important. So I just wanted to make that note. That was all. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cressler. Councillor Collins, just one moment. Councillor Collins.
I was just going to speak. If someone else has got questions, then that's...
No, it's back to you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, just Councillor Collins, if I could just update you on the school traffic community. So the staff are working with the school PNC in terms of the scope and the meeting process, and the aim is to have it up by term 3. And the principals happy to work with the PNC presidents. So it is a work in progress, and we're just waiting for some further feedback.
Fantastic. Thank you. All right. Yeah, I'll just briefly speak on this. Just on this one matter that's on the update. First of all, thank you for the update, and I look forward to the new system being able to capture everything. I think it's going to save a lot of time and make it a lot easier for us to keep on track of things. Just this motion to maintain a role of business voters. I might just provide some feedback that I've had from the community, from business owners and business operators around Hunters Hill that thought it was absolutely, could not understand why this council wouldn't be encouraging them and advertising that they can actually vote. I think if we're going to have a local democracy and take pride in being a local democracy, the idea that you wouldn't encourage those entitled to vote and make them aware of it, because a lot of businesses are not aware of it.
Councillor Collins, can I just interrupt you just for a moment?
Yes.
I think we're dealing with a matter that was debated in council and it was voted upon. And I've just got a sense that you're reopening a discussion which is not on the agenda for tonight, and it's already been decided upon.
No,
I'd be happy to have your suggestions, and I'm happy to have you circulate your thoughts to all councillors, but I just don't want to open a debate on this item tonight.
It's not a debate, Mr. Mayor. I'm just simply making a point on something that's on the business paper. I'm nearly finished, but I think because it's on the paper, I am allowed to speak to it. Yeah, so I just think it's...
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Sanderson.
It's on the paper because of a clerical error. I don't think that opens the way for Councillor Collins to speak on a matter which really isn't relevant to anything on the that should be on the agenda.
I will explain why it's relevant. I'm making a point of why it's relevant. So,
Councillor Collins, go ahead.
So I think that if anyone is going to say that they support local democracy and they would deliberately quash a motion that encourages people that are entitled to vote and advertise their excuse me.
Point of order, Mr. Mayor.
What's the point of order?
Councillor Cresswood.
Mr. Mayor, I know that Councillor Collins says he's not debating a motion that actually isn't before us tonight, but he's making assertions about other councillors' decisions about a motion that's not actually on the paper to be discussed tonight. It's a note that was erroneously put in a report. The General Manager's apologised for the mistake. I would argue, Mr. Mayor, that this isn't a matter to be debated in the council and that what Councillor Collins is doing is debating it.
Councillor Collins, Councillor Collins, I'm going to uphold the 2 points of order for a particular reason. It was on the paper in error. It has been debated, and we actually don't have an opportunity to debate this with you tonight. You can express very strong opinions on something, but we really can't debate that with you, which leaves you with the upper hand because we can't debate it. So unfortunately, Councillor Collins, with all due respects, I'm going to uphold the 2 points of order.
And you're going to quash the discussion on a matter of democracy. Well, okay, Mr. Mayor, that's
a point of order, Councillor Collins, and I'm upholding a point of order. So, if there are any further comments on this particular item, which is before us, 4.5, Councillor Miles.
Mr. Mayor, don't know why that's a contentious issue. Beyond me. Just in relation to the notice of motion to address residents' safety in Prince Edward Street.
Yes.
Funds are not currently available to engage a traffic consultant to undertake the required investigation. Could I get some clarification through you to the staff as to when those funds will be made available for that traffic study?
General Manager.
Yeah. Through Mr. Mayor, just a point to note, Councillor McLaughlin's just dropped off.
Okay.
For councillors' benefit. In terms of the Prince Edward traffic, I might ask Director Development to explain, because we're talking, there are 2 studies. There was one that was undertaken in 2018-19 by Headway, and then there was a notice of motion that was brought forward, which has led to a need for a further study. So, Director Development, can you just provide a quick update, and then I'll ask the Director Service Delivery. Steve?
Yep. George.
Just go ahead.
Apologise for the delay. It was a workshop with all the residents in the street held, and I can't get it up at the moment because my computer just crashed, where there was outcomes from that meeting. The outcomes were that we notify the police of the people speeding up and down that street. We line mark the street because we need line marking. We put up some flaps as well, and we report this matter to the police, which we have. We've addressed all of those issues following that recommendation by the workshop. There are other matters with regard to traffic and parking and traffic issues that have and will be considered by the Traffic Committee on the second study as well. So the issue at the moment, we haven't had any concerns raised by the residents in that street following that meeting. We're looking at the possibility of doing the second study and see what other impacts of that was part of the part closure of the road up at the top of Victoria Road.
Thank you. Councillors, any further questions? Councillor Miles, does that answer your question?
Well, it's just that obviously it's been some 6 months almost since we put that motion, and point 1 was that council immediately develop a plan to make Prince Edward Street North northbound a residents only access road to end the rat running. That's obviously not been actioned.
Could I just defer to the General Manager for a moment, Councillor Miles? General Manager.
Mr. Mayor, can I now just ask Director Service Delivery to explain what actions we have taken since that notice of motion was put forward? Thank you.
This might clarify it.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So this motion came after the previous study, and we've since spoken to a traffic consultant to address these points that were raised, which require further investigation, traffic count and all the data that he requires. And we've obtained a quote from him for which we don't currently have the funds, which is what that note refers to. That's something that we were hoping to address the next financial year when additional funding is available.
Thank you.
Councillors, any further comments or queries? Can I put the motion? I'll put the motion. Those in favour? Against? That's unanimous. Thank you. Councillors and viewers, we have a confidential matter that we need to attend to. So we're going to go into confidential session. Could I have a mover, please? Move Councillor Williams, seconded Councillor Crassoy. All in favour? Could you close the live feed, please, and we'll come back and close off business when this matter's